Hello and welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm really glad you could be here. So this is going to be really exciting because today I'm going to teach you not just things that you need to know to build a business. I'm going to show you a massive shortcut to actually buying a business. And this is so important right now because when the economy changes, there is a dramatic opportunity to be able to buy businesses, buy them right. And a lot of businesses go up for sale. A lot of people get frustrated when economy changes. And it's just the amount of opportunities that open up for this. The statistics are just through the roof. So with us today is Elliott. Elliott, I almost called you Eric. Elliott Holland. He's a founder of Guardian Due Diligence, a business buying expert. He's a Harvard MBA, spent 10 years buying businesses for himself and others, and now prevents his clients from losing millions buying bad businesses. Now, Mr. Holland has 10 plus years of experience executing middle market deals as an entrepreneur who is spending his own money for due diligence. Now, he fully understands the challenges in executing good deals and avoiding lemons as well. He's a Harvard School trained, seasoned buy-side advisor who spent almost a decade as an independent sponsor, business buyer, acquisition entrepreneur before starting Guardian. Elliott, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well,
I think
I'm
it's
real.
going to be great. I'm
I
excited.
can't even begin to tell you how excited I am because I have several friends, and I literally just texted one your bio right now before we started and said, "Hey,
Oh,
look who I'm
excellent.
interviewing right now because this is what they do." And I have a lot of people that buy businesses that come to us to get financing. So, man, exciting time for for your industry right now, huh?
Very exciting time. I think a lot of people are both finding that there's good deals in the marketplace and also realizing that if they have cash, they can actually, get some great deals under their belt. And also for people who were considering selling or were on the fence, I mean, nothing like a kick in the butt like COVID to just say it's time to put this business up for sale.
So let's start with that because this is new concept for a lot of people. Why buy versus build?
Great question. So the first thing is the probability of success. So when you think about starting a business, I think something like 90% of startups fail. And so from a pure numbers perspective, unless you have a very high opinion of your ability to beat the odds, and or unless you don't have the financial capacity to buy, then you got to sort of think about what is your probability of success if you want to just build, right? So if you want to go into my garage and figure something out, then that's a way higher level of difficulty than buying, but not everybody has the capacity to buy. The other thing to
So,
consider is startup land is crazy from a product market fit, marketing, crossing the chasm, early adopters, having a long-term vision for the business you can't execute yet, hiring people, figuring out how to do things for cheap or do things at a lesser quality than you want to. All these kind of messy, grow up, adolescent things. Whereas buying gets you sort of a stable platform where you can tweak a lot of times and still get a lot of juice from small changes. So those are the two main rationales for differences, in my opinion, about buying versus building.
a lot of great points. And from everything I've seen, I think it makes a lot more sense to buy than build. But one of the big points that you just mentioned is having the financial ability to do so. What's that really look like? Because, there's people out there that say you could buy businesses with no money down. And a lot of people go down that road or try to go down that road. But what's the real deal? What kind of capital do you really need to be able to buy a business?
Well, you can buy business with no money down, but you can toss the Lombardi trophy off of the back of a boat after you won a Super Bowl, right? You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. The difficulty in doing something like buying a business with no money down is so high that it's really speculative. And so it's not really, to my opinion, a business principle or plan. It's a speculative option. If you want to go buy a business, so the minimums, right? And that's not what gets things done, but the minimum to sort of be able to have a conversation through the SBA 7A loan program. If you buy $1 million business, you need to put at least 10% down. So $100,000 at the minimum will get you up to $1 million business. The reality is you need to have more money than that. You don't want to put every single dollar of your life savings into a single unit instrument that could fail. So, you're probably talking somewhere quarter million to $1 million, depending on what your risk appetite is to buy $1 million business. And then if you're talking about a $5 million business and 10%, now you're talking about a couple $1 million. And so I think there's two ways to answer that, Ty. So what you can do, there's a huge expansion in terms of younger career professionals, some straight out of business school, doing ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. A lot of the top business schools have these programs. And so oftentimes what you have to do is sort of partner with somebody else. And at that point, let's say I have, $100,000 and Ty has $400,000, then maybe we put our money together and one of us goes and buys the business and the other one is an equity partner in that business. So I think in that range. So I think if you're $250,000 to $500,000, I think you're in the game. Or if you can get your hands on that much cash equity. Now that's not the full purchase price, right? So the other piece is you need to go get debt. So if you want to buy $1 million business, you have your 100,000. Now you need to go get a $900,000 loan and think about your credit capacity and ability to go do that. So kind of a convoluted answer, but that's really the market for smaller deals, which what I would call $5 million and under.
Okay. So a lot of people out there might say you can get an SBA loan for 90%, or not a lot of people, but this is the kind of the idea is that you can get an SBA loan for 90%, and then you can use assets of the business or something else to get the other 10%. So you can use the account receivables to borrow against, you can use equipment or inventory or stocks, bonds, 401ks, IRAs to be able to borrow against to get the other 10%, or have the seller do a holdback or carry it the other 10%. Realistic?
Not really. Again, possible, yes. Realistic, no. So if a client came to me and said, hey, Elliott, I want you to get paid only if I close the deal. And what I want to do is go buy a business with no money down, because I'm gonna leverage the assets of the business to tell the bank that that's equity and hope that that works. So I'm gonna go figure out a way to do a seller holdback that they already know about, and they want your cash equity, but I'm gonna tell them that this seller holdback is actually cash equity. It's a bunch of stuff that could happen, but won't likely happen. So I'm an optimist and entrepreneur. So, right, I'm never going to tell somebody you can't. That's dumb. What I would say is the bank knows what equity is and what seller rollover is and what seller equity is, right? I would argue if you're leveraging your 401k, that is your cash. So it's the same as equity from my perspective. From a lender's perspective, it may be different, but you can liquidate those things to cash and then use them. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but I know people who have done it. The thing about leveraging the company's assets to buy the company, again, the seller knows he can leverage the company's assets to get money. So why is he going to give it to you for the same amount of money that he could leverage the assets for, or she could leverage the assets for? So some of the things that are these great whiteboard stories, back of the pub discussions don't really fit all that well into the real world typically. Now, though, here's some exceptions. You buy a business from your dad's best friend, you can do a lot of things. You buy a business from your parents, from somebody at the country club with you, from somebody from your fraternity, somebody who knows you, loves you, you can do a bunch of things. I mean, you could also get a 100% seller note, complete earnout. And some businesses sell that way. So professional services firms like CPA firms and other firms like that, depending on how steady their revenues, sometimes they sell in an earnout structure. But again, we're talking about the 1%, the 3% of deals, not the lion's share.
What about before buying a business? What are some things you absolutely need to know before even starting this process?
Sure. I think you need to have some sense of what the full process is. So from day one to what I would say, you need to really prepare at least 2 years. And I thought that was crazy when I first started, but it really is a process where you should at least allocate 2 years to it. You would hope that it doesn't take that long, but I think if you tell yourself you have 12 months, you really should almost hang it up because it's just not enough time. So you need to kind of understand what the process is, understand the investments. So it's not like your full investment is just the $100,000 you have to put in equity for the deal. You also need to pay for travel back and forth to go see companies. You may have expenses to set up a website, to set up infrastructure to go find companies. You're going to need a lawyer to do a purchase agreement and a set of legal docs to consummate the transaction. Either you're going to need to know how to read small, messy private company financials, or you're going to need to hire a firm like Guardian Due Diligence to look at small, messy private company financials so you don't get hosed. And you're going to need to have some way to cover your living expenses for that time period. And so there's going to be some cash you're going to need. I think you're also going to need to prepare yourself for the new sort of level of risk you're taking on. So I know a lot of people that go from undergrad to a regular W-2 job to business school. And now for the first time, they're going from like very steady, structured things to like the wild, wild west. You need to get ready for and talk to people who understand what the wild, wild west of entrepreneurship really is. You know, I call it open air negotiations where there's no rules. So you and a seller negotiating over price, there's comps, no sellers looking and talking to you about comps. There's brokers, but a seller's not listening to a broker more than listen to themselves. So you need to get ready for that. Even people coming out of like corporate jobs, you need to get ready for the biggest thing you were playing for most years previous was your bonus, which is 10 to 20% of your salary. Now the whole game is the quality of this one thing you're going to do this deal. And so I think you need to know the process. You need to get your capital in order. You need to understand what advisors you're going to need, and you need to understand the new risk levels that you're dealing with. Those would be the four things that I think are sort of must do's if you want to start this process.
How do you figure out what a business is really worth?
So for most people, it depends on size and growth. So I can make it complicated, but nobody's going to listen to a complicated description of this on a podcast. For most businesses, from call it $500,000 in cash flow a year to $1 million, even stretch it to $1.5 million, the purchase price is going to be somewhere between 2.5 to 5.5 times cash flow or seller's discretionary earnings, which is cash flow when you add back all the money the seller has taken out of the business. So generally you're in that range. It's somewhat of a wide range, but I think the other way that you find out what a business is worth is go research online, figure out what businesses like this have sold for. Typically businesses of this range sell for a multiple of EBITDA or a multiple of seller's discretionary. There's databases out there to figure out what comparable businesses have sold for, just like there's appraisals and Zillow for houses. The other thing, if you want to get slightly more complicated, there's valuation models that can take a projection of the future cash flows, discount those back to time zero, and you get a valuation that way. You can also pay for somebody to do a valuation on a business.
How do you avoid losing millions and pick the wrong one? Like, what kind of things are you looking for so you don't pick, a dud, a lemon, a junky business?
Right. So I will probably write a book called How to Lose $1 Million Buying a Business.
That's a great book title, by the way.
I think so. I'm testing it out in a couple of places. And so here's how you do that, because then you just prevent these things and then you don't do that, right? So first off is believing the financials coming from the seller or the broker. But that's the biggest one people do. I mean, and let me tell you two reasons why that's so easy to do and why that's so ill-informed to do. So I told you a second ago, valuations are a multiple of cash flow. I'm gonna use cash flow, people use EBITDA, SDE, I'm gonna say cash flow. So what ends up happening is if I'm selling my business and I can convince you there's $100,000 of cash flow in that business that there's actually not, that I manufactured or misrepresented data to make you think, I don't get $100,000 for telling you there's $100,000 of extra cash flow. I get 4 times that. I get $400,000. So for most people on the seller seat, it is a time with the highest motivation to tell a story. And so what that means as a buyer is you need to recognize that and say, I need to trust but verify everything in this financial package to make sure every single dollar of cash flow that's represented is actually real cash flow. And if you don't know how to do that and you're putting up $1 million, you'd be a fool not to hire somebody, M&A advisor, a diligence service like myself, to help you understand what is the true cash flow of the business. The other thing people do to lose $1 million buying a business is fall in love with deals, particularly ones close to home. So for a lot of people, they're saying, hey, I'm working this job. I know a lot of things. If I buy a company in my industry that's close to home, I can forget this boss thing, go by myself into my own boss situation and be a boss. And then you go find a company 10 minutes, 20 minutes down the road. You fall in love with it because it fits all your personal life goals. You stop looking at the financials, you stop looking at the operations, you start believing things that people tell you because it fits your life plan, and you get hosed. I think another way to lose $1 million buying a business is to not fully recognize the risk that you're getting yourself into. So what oftentimes happens is people assume the business did $1 million in cash flow last year, so it'll do $1 million next year. Well, not necessarily. So a lot of these deals, you kick the seller out of the business. He built the whole thing, hired other people, and so those employees may not work for you the same way they worked for him or her. You did not close any of those sales relationships. Anybody who knows salespeople recognize sales relationships often go with salespeople when they leave. And so you inherit a business, you got two salespeople, and one of them already had conversations with the guy across the street because he didn't know who the new owner was going to be. He walks and half your sales go with him. Additionally, markets go up and down. You can buy a business and not realize something like COVID's coming, or buy a business and not realize that the industry was changing. So imagine buying into a cab company in 2013, right? Wouldn't have been a good thing to do. So I think you miss the financials the first way you lose. I think you fall in love with deals the second way you lose. And the third way you lose is not to understand, mitigate, protect yourself from sort of catastrophic deal risk.
So I took this course years ago on buying exotic cars, right? It's been phenomenal. But the first thing it says to do is you got to kind of find the car that you want, the kind of car. You kind of narrow it down to the years, and you just monitor the market to look for that. Is it the same thing here? Are you just out in general looking for any kind of business, or you really have to kind of narrow it down like that to say, okay, I want an SEO business, and then, kind of define your criteria and only go looking for SEO? Because it's dangerous, man. Because like we all have ADD as entrepreneurs, and then we start looking at businesses, and every single business we see is like, oh my gosh, I want to get into that industry. That is it. So like, what's the best way to do this?
Couple of answers to that. I am way more in the Warren Buffett way of thinking about business acquisition than more speculative buyers, meaning I would rather have very distinct businesses I'm looking for, industry sizes, locations, and I'm willing to put the time in to look long periods of time for those specific things. And when they come up and they're available for a price less than what I think the intrinsic value is, I'm willing to buy those things. And I think that's how I would generally instruct people to do. So to your point about pick the kind of car, pick the color, do you pick it in the South because it doesn't have, salt on it, or in the North because it might get it for cheaper and your best friend knows how to redo underbodies? You got to figure that out. But the other thing is, and this is the intersection of life and business, for a lot of people, particularly some of my clients who are, 30 to 50 years old, right? You might have a wife, two kids. It's a deal breaker to take your kids from Seattle to Tampa. Ty, you love Tampa. Somebody in Seattle might not have Tampa on their possibility list. And so if you have additional constraints, you need to be thoughtful about that. So now if you want to double up the criteria, if I only want SaaS businesses valued at less than 4 times cash flow within an hour of Seattle, you may extend that 2-year time frame to 5 years. But you might say, hey, look, I'm looking for businesses that are in one of these 5 industries within 2 hours of Seattle, and you can land the plane. So I think the way to sort of do it all encompassing is to prioritize your constraints. Like if you have been in SaaS for 40 years, you'd be a fool not to buy a SaaS company. Then is it location or is it size next? Start layering those, and it'll give you a rubric of sort of how to look. I think just like in marketing or buying companies or marketing or buying cars or buying houses, the more narrow your aperture not only benefits you because you'll find specific things that fit your criteria that you wouldn't have seen, but also people sort of know to show you stuff a little bit outside of your criteria. So you'll still get some stuff that's a little bit outside of it, even if you make your criteria narrow.
What's due diligence? Why is it important? Why is it especially important now with the pandemic?
Due diligence is the verify part of trust and verify. So it's looking at all of the data to ensure that in business acquisition, making sure that the business is what it is presented to be. Meaning, when you start looking at companies, you get these confidential information memorandums, and there are these 10 to 30 page marketing, nice, clean write-ups of this beautiful business on a hill. And when a guy like me looks at it, it's not a beautiful business on a hill. It's a decent business in an industrial park, you know, an hour from a major city. And so due diligence is checking the financials, the operations, the risks, the employees, and a significant list of things to be sure that the business not only will produce the cash flow from last year, but that under your guidance, it's likely to produce that cash flow next year. Why is it important? Because I can show you a graveyard of people who didn't do it, who are bankrupt. I mean, if you buy $1 million business on the promise it was a quarter, $250,000 of cash flow, and you paid a 4x multiple, and it actually was $175,000 worth of cash flow, you may be bankrupt. If you buy a business and the top salesman brings in 40%, and that top salesperson leaves, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And I think for people who don't do diligence full time, but are taking catastrophic risk in the size of the business they're acquiring, right? So if you got 50% of your capital on the table, you want to have a team playing defense or diligence for you that's able to protect half of your network, right? We're talking about big numbers here. And why is it particularly difficult now? Because it's the confluence of a couple of things. It's a COVID impacted market that's going to affect some companies up, down, and that may or may not be sustainable impact. You have technology and automation taking over the whole world. And so companies that have been around for hundreds of years as market leaders are toppling over. Who expected to see what happened to General Electric happen to them? How many other companies will have a difficult next 5 or 10 years that you would have never thought? And additionally, with more digital SaaS software companies and their high valuations coming into play, you have to really be thoughtful about, are you valuing this company as a old school software business, new school software business, traditional brick and mortar business? So again, I think for people, when you're placing big bets on things, you want to be informed. And so due diligence allows you to be an entrepreneur and say, I like this business, I like this seller, I like this industry. Now, Elliott, tell me if the numbers are solid and the operations are going to be sustainable, and help me understand that. We prevent people from buying bad businesses and help focus them on the acquisition of good businesses.
I think you talk about like 5 frequent mistakes that business owners make when buying a business. And you might have already hit these. And if so, that's okay. We'll move on. But are there 5 mistakes that maybe we haven't dove into that you really got to avoid beyond what you've talked about when you're looking to buy a business?
Yeah, trust in the glossy financials without going into the base data sets, whatever those are, QuickBooks, Shopify platform, Amazon platform. If you're not looking at a data set that's got QuickBooks, Amazon, Shopify at the top and doesn't look like those headers, mistake. Believing everything smart, well-respected, wink, wink people tell you. So the brokerage firms that represent these businesses have great reputations. And I'm not even saying that they don't deserve them, but they don't have recourse on bad deals sold. So you have to treat them like used car salespeople and just be very thoughtful about understanding your asset. Sellers are great people, typically, stewards of their community, people with families, great pictures on the wall. They still have a 4X motivation to lie to you about the cash flow. So you got to be really careful about people who in a normal sense would be great, respectable folks that in this case have a very high motivation to tell you a story. Third, they make the mistake of doing everything themselves. So before I started Guardian executing due diligence as an advisor, I was an independent business buyer buying companies for myself and for others. And when you're in the diligence process, you are finance guy, negotiator, business quality assessor, strategy consultant, legal document reader, financial report analyzer, go get debt process leader, tell your family and your other constituents what you're doing, master. There's so many hats that you're wearing. And if you try to do all those things at the level of a $5 million transaction simultaneously, you're going to fail. You need a team. You need to figure out where you're weak and mitigate and fortify with advisors that can support you. Fourth, what do people do? I think they often underestimate the data management side of this thing. So people think the first 5 deals that they look at are going to get them a winner, and the number is probably closer to 50 or 100. And so if you don't have good data sets and be able to track what deals you're looking at, what size are they, which ones are you actually competitive on, which ones are you not, I think you lose. And I think fifth, mistakes people make, there's a lot of hubris in business buying. I'm the buyer, I'm bringing the money, look at me. And you're actually kind of on a job interview with the seller. Not because you have to subordinate yourself to them, but the seller doesn't have to sell to anyone, and they can sell to you for less than the business is worth if they like you, but they can sell to you at 50% more than the business is worth if they don't like you. And so when you get a lot of hubris and forget that there's two sides to this, I think people disrespect certain constituents in the marketplace. I think business brokers are one of the ones that get disrespected the most, and it screws up people's economics on deals. I believe you need to treat everybody in this industry respectfully, recognize what their job is to do and who they represent, and do your work, but be kind to everyone. I think if I had to rattle off 5 mistakes, those are the 5.
Elliott, where do you go to find the right businesses for sale?
That's a great question. So if you're me, you have a database of 10 years of business brokers and investment bankers and sites that list deals. If you're new to the process, I think you go online. There's a lot of websites that list deals. bizbuysell.com is one that lists a lot of traditional businesses. Quiet Light Brokerage is one that lists a lot of online businesses. You go to lawyers, accountants, tax attorneys, estate planning folks that have clients who are business owners, and talk to them and see if they have people who they know who are selling. You keep all these sources for deals in a database, and you mine them as often as you can. Your other option, if you don't have a good list of places to go look for deals, Guardian Due Diligence is not just a diligence provider. We also provide a full suite of buy-side services for people wanting to buy a company. So you can go hire us to do deal sourcing for you. We have a deal sourcing plus package that's very reasonably priced that you can find on our website, guardianduediligence.com.
What if I have money or access to investors with money, want to buy? Can I just come to you from the beginning of the process for help?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably 40% of my clients right now got into that situation, had investors that they knew wanted to look at deals, sort of educated themselves on what the process looked like, and then came across me on searchfunder.com or linkedin.com, and now they're my clients. I had a conversation right before we ended with the guy out of the Denver area who was an alum of my alma mater, Georgia Tech, and he's starting his process, and we're walking him through from beginning to end the whole thing. So you can get coaching. We're one of the few firms out there that will coach you through the process from deal sourcing to diligence to execution. Many do part of it. So there's a lot of, Roland Frazier, Walker Dybel, they'll teach you, here's how you might consider buying a business. But when it comes to execution, that's not where they're good. There's, CPAs and lawyers that can help you with execution to an extent, but aren't really deal people. They're very conservative folks that are going to tell you no more often than yes, oftentimes. We're sort of deal-oriented, entrepreneurial folks who can walk you from the beginning of the process all the way to the end.
I love it. Elliott, where can everybody go to learn more?
They can go to my website, guardianduediligence.com, and find me there. You can contact me, set up time, etc. You can also go to LinkedIn and find me there, Elliott Holland, ELLIOTT, Holland, like the country. And then if you get stuck there, you can go to elliott-holland.com, and you can find me there with my contact information as well.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ty.
So look, if you're listening, watching to this, it's pretty good insight. The reality is that if you do any research into buying a business versus building a business, you will see that I've seen no disadvantages of buying versus building, and all advantages, meaning that, Elliott's right. The hardest part is building the actual business from scratch. And most people fail in doing so. But when you already have a business that's tested the industry, that understands their avatar, that already has scalable marketing in place, it's just like taking a horse that's already running and making it run a little bit faster than teaching it to run. That's a horrible analogy. Don't forget you even heard that analogy. I don't even know what to compare it to, but I could just tell you this. It's a lot easier to to buy an existing business that's already operating well and then make it work better and even make more profit than it is to try to take a business and build it from scratch. And again, the problem is, and I think Elliott hit the nail on the head, is there's a lot of people out there that teach theory in this. And I know them well, like, Roland Fraser, for example, I do all the funding for all of his deals and all of his students, but there's a difference between theory and execution. And when it comes to execution, this is what Elliott does really well. It's the making sure you don't miss the details, making sure you don't miss the mistakes that could wipe out almost all of the cash that you have available, burn relationships with investors, take tremendous amount of stress, time. It's all the bad stuff you want to stay away from. So if you want to avoid that, if you're interested in taking the next logical step to be able to buy a business instead of building one and from scratch and have an easier path to success, then make sure you check out guardianduediligence.com. That's guardianduediligence.com. This guy's for real. As a matter of fact, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to get his number and connect him with several of my friends because I think that he could do really well to help them take their business to the next level, the same as I think he could help you. So make sure you go to guardianduediligence.com. That's guardianduediligence.com.